Republican side just because I disagree with the values more.
Your Republican, your Republican magnet always kind of just goes.
It just pulls a little bit more.
Pulls a little bit more.
That looks really nice over there, but I'll just come back. Yeah.
What about my Democrats over here?
As somebody with I do have political aspirations, and I have claimed the Democratic Party, and I live in Alabama, and I have political aspirations for Alabama. Obviously, we have had a red wave come across recently, and there have been a lot of my friends who are young and getting into politics, and they're all in the Republican Party, and they're like, hey man, you know how easy it would be for you to get elected as a Republican? And I'm like, yeah, it would be easy, but I would be betraying people that that I believe in. I would be betraying my beliefs. So there's always temptation, but you have to, like I said earlier, you've got to stand for something. And I've found what I stand for, and I'm hoping that the Democratic Party never betrays me with the policies and the theories that they have behind their policies. And one day, maybe we all can just be independent like we're looking for, and just kind of side.
Is that possible? Seriously, that's what I want to know. Is it possible to be an independent? Do you have to choose? Do you have to choose a political party?
No, you don't. You don't have to choose a political party. You can be independent, and it's possible to get elected as an independent. It's just a lot harder. You got to get your name on the ballot.
Why do you think?
And different states have different stipulations because of the two major parties having put those stipulations on being an independent.
Why do you think it's harder?
Well, you've got to get usually the process is this. It depends on the office you're running for, but most of the times there's petition involved. First of all, to get your name on the ballot, and then you've got to draw enough of the votes from both parties to get yourself in there. It's more like backlash politics, and it's been done before. You want to draw folks from both parties. When you can successfully draw a great number from the conservative and the liberal parties to your center, you have to be a moderate usually to pull this off. And it's most independents are moderates, so right there in the middle of the political spectrum, when you can pull from both parties, you weaken them enough you can get in. And some have successfully done it, but it is so hard to do. It really is.
I think another main thing that is really hard to be an independent is the money issue, the fundraising, and everything. You have honestly, we like to say that elections are all about the issues. But most of the time, the politician with the most money will win the election because they have more resources to put out ads, to send out mailings, everything like this. So I mean, I'm not saying that's the case every single time, but majority of the time, the campaign with the most money will win the election just because they have more resources they can work with. Now, as far as voters being independent, I think voters can be independent. I think that's if you're not really you don't really have conservative values or you don't have liberal values, and you're just kind of on the fence. You see both sides. You can say, well, I see that this works a little bit, but I can see where this works a little bit. I think that that would be that. If that's what you want to do, that's good for you. And so that way you just basically vote with whoever. But once again, you're not going to agree with whoever you vote with 100%. You have to find who you agree with the most. And and I would almost say, like I said earlier, usually the independent person isn't going to have, right now, as far as how our political system is now, they're not going to have a chance to win. So I mean, I'm not saying don't vote for them, but if I was an independent, I would definitely find who of the two fit me most, and I would vote for one of those two.
I think that it's very important that voters be independent. In my view, that the political process that we have in our democracy is that if you go to the polls and you vote for your self-interest, if every single voter votes their self-interest, their independent interest, then as a nation, the best policies will prevail. Is it not correct? So yes, it is great to be independent, but the reason why I think that we have a party system and it's been so successful is because that candidates, especially on a local level like a mayor, they don't usually have to claim a party because everyone knows who their mayor is. Everyone can meet the candidates and know what they stand for and know who they are. But when you get on into congressional races, especially the national election, the president, you don't really know them. You just get what their ads pay for, and you get things like that. So they choose a party, and then the party develops a platform, and then you have something to base your vote off of. And then I guess that's where voters kind of start deciding, I they go ahead and prelude the election and say, well, I believe more democratic principles, so I'm going to lean towards these democratic candidates already.
How do you think these principles were shaped in the policies of Democrats and Republicans? Democrats, you all say that you all want to give everyone a fair fighting chance. For Republicans, you say, well, you know, we hold certain possibly religious or potentially Christian or whatever type of values that we hold near and dear to our heart, and as a result, that's how we run. That's how we want our country ran. Where do you think these principles came from? Where do you think Democrats over here? Where do you think the ideas of Democrats wanting everyone to kind of get that fair shot, get that fair chance? Where did that come from?
Lyndon B. Johnson had a program. It was called the let's see if I can remember my terminology here correctly. We were just talking about the Great Society. In this program, he wanted to fight poverty, wanted to provide equally for everyone. It was great. At the time, though, that interacted with Vietnam and what was going on with that conflict. And I think his Great Society, though, has kind of shaped what the Democrats' view of the role of government is. And I think to this day we carry on those principles. And a lot of it, you know, not only with Lyndon B. Johnson, but you also had JFK. He also had a great play in that, too. So, I mean, Brett's got something to say, but I think that's kind of the foundation for where we're at right now. And so to speak, we've evolved from them, but, you know, that's kind of the root of it.
Okay. Brett Johnson?
I think some of the principles that are behind policies of Democrats and their way of thinking come from a lot of historical figures. I mean, a lot of my Democrats, even though some people stereotype them as a-religious, base their democratic principles off of their Christian religion, in that Jesus, on his time on earth, he provided for the poor. He took care of the least of these, and that's a lot of the focus of the Democratic Party, is making sure that the least of these are taken care of in America. And it's not only that, but you look at some of the great civil leaders like Martin Luther King and others. Those may be where some of the principles of the Democratic Party came from and stemmed out of the philosophical idea of, let's make sure that the people who are underprivileged have a better chance to succeed, so that as a nation and as a whole, everyone will prosper.
Okay, let me ask you, our Republican panel over here, where do you think some of the Republican principles came from? Things such as potentially church and family and togetherness and things of that aspect. Keeping things in the community. I know those are some of the values of Republicans. Where do you think those ideas came from? And focusing on the individual rather than the whole.
Religious persecution, leaving England because of King James, coming to America to have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We formed our Constitution based off of, Marxist views, communist views, any type of view you can think of, and that was the whole reason why it was formed. So I think with Republicans, they like to hold on to conservative values only because it's traditional. I support America. I'm very open to new ideas and new things, but at the same time, I think that this country should have a national English language and national flag, and you should stand up and salute it. And it's part of the Constitution. And being an American is to support your country, to get, to vote for elected officials. And if your country, your government runs you over, it's your own fault because you didn't step in and try to fix the process. That's just part of being an American, because you're free. So.
Right, and I think that we should definitely, some change is good, but I definitely think that we need to stay with what our founding fathers created this country for. And I think that's a lot of the conservative ideas, and I think that there's another stereotype over on the left side that Republicans don't want to help out, the poor. I don't think that is what we believe at all. I think what we're trying to do is kind of, come up with more, rules to where people can't work the system in their favor. They can't play the system to where, let's take welfare, for example. I know people here at JSU that they don't need welfare because, their parents help them out. Say they don't need food stamps. Okay, because their parents give them money, so they don't need it, but they get it anyway just so they can have some extra spending money. They don't need it, but they're using our taxpayer dollars to go just so they can have a little bit of extra spending money, and when they don't actually need it. So I think that's where, that big stereotype of Republicans don't want to help out the poor people. That's not the case at all. We just don't want to see our taxpayer dollars going towards people that don't need that.
The ability to, individual responsibility, like your family talked about needing health care and, and so forth. The Constitution outlines, the general welfare clause, to take care of its citizens. So I have no problem with the taxes levied for those types of things. At the same time, we've turned it from, an individual responsibility society to some sort of entitlement society. I mean, just last month alone, over 60 million people have filed for disability. That's insane.
Tyler Suits, let me ask you this. What do you think these ideas of the policies or the principles of the Republican Party? Anya said that she believes it comes from religious persecution when the Europeans came from England, trying to escape the tyranny that was occurring in Europe. Where do you think that these principles of the Republican Party came from?
I have to agree with history again. It's like I was talking about when I first got on here. I talked about Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt. There's always some form of history that I think it's always built onto, and they continue building through the years of America. So it's definitely history. It started off with King James, and it came all the way up till where we are now, where you can look at Bush and his actions here recently. So yeah, I don't think it's just one thing and it just kind of happened. I think it was one thing and maybe it started it and then it built, and it just continued going.
Jason A. Sumner?
Well, we have to look at it too. There are two philosophies for government in the United States. The Republicans embody a philosophy of limited government, less regulation of business. The Democrats favor a heavier government presence, more regulation on certain aspects of maybe healthcare. We want regulation on healthcare. We want regulation on some businesses, some industries. So that's where the philosophies come from. That's where they differ. The Republicans, less regulation. The Democrats, bigger government. Smaller government versus bigger government. This argument goes all the way back to the formation of the United States. And it's clearly evident, goes back to the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. That was the main debate. And those two political ideas, those two philosophies have survived throughout the ages. And they were embodied in different parties. And at one point in the same party. You look at the Democrats, the Democratic Party was the conservative party. They've changed. There was a shift. And that's that shift we're talking about with Lyndon B. Johnson, his administration, the 1964 Civil Rights Movement. That's where that major shift occurs. In the past, your Republican Party was actually the more liberal of the two. And to say that both parties, they grow. Government grows under every administration. Doesn't matter what the party is. Government has to grow. I would say, though, under a Republican administration, government is going to grow less than under a Democratic administration. So these are the things we look at, but these are the philosophies of the two parties. It all comes down to governance. I
noticed you said that, and that is true. That there was that switch between within Kennedy and Lyndon Baines.
Well, that's very significant, especially in the southern states.
Absolutely,
and that's in reference to where we're at in Alabama. That was a significant event, especially for Alabama.
Absolutely. Do you think that there will ever be a significant event like that in our country's history that will create that switch where Democrats all of a sudden take on Republican ideas and Republicans all of a sudden take on Democratic ideas?
It's inevitable that parties evolve. We can't say that there ever will be, but then again, there may be. The parties may shift again. It's happened once, and like I said, the Democrats, we didn't start out with a Republican and a Democratic Party. We had the Whigs. We've had different parties in the history of the United States that have come up and gone away. So parties evolve.
Right. I think there's a possibility for that shift, but I think that people who educate themselves, they're going to stay with their values. They're going to say, if the Republican Party all of a sudden becomes liberal and the Democrat Party becomes conservative, I'm still a conservative. I'm still staying with the conservative ideals. So I really don't think if the parties do switch, I really don't think it makes that much of a difference. You're just putting a different name on it. You still the people that are informed and the people, and people will eventually maybe right when that switch happens, people won't be informed about it, and people won't know about it. But I definitely think over time you're still gonna have the same constituents within those parties. So I really don't think it matters. What the name is. It's the ideals behind it.
I would say even that has happened, or is beginning to happen recently. It looks like, especially with the Tea Party movement and things like that, the right is getting more far right nationally. I will only say this nationally, that the RNC and the DNC are moving farther to each side of the political spectrum. So it may come one day that it's completely different than what we know it now.
Let me ask you all this. Democrats and Republicans here, my Democrats and my Republicans here. Do you have these values because you are a Democrat? And do you have these values because you are Republican? Or if you choose to be Republican, then you have to take on those values? Or